Hi, I'm Erin Dilworth with Citizens for a Healthy Bay, and we're getting ready to go on a bay patrol. So Citizens for a Healthy Bay was founded back in 1990 to address the widespread contamination here in Commencement Bay in Tacoma. And one of the ways that we address that contamination today is through our Bay Patrol program, where we patrol the waters of Commencement Bay and South Sound twice a week, looking for threats to our clean waters. So on today's patrol, we're going to go on one of our many routes. We're going to start here along Schuster Parkway and head up to Point Defiance. Along the way, we're going to check out the grain terminal, the creosote pilings at Dickman Mill Park, and the old Asarco site. Then we'll head over to Browns Point and Marine View Drive and check out the shoreline over there, as well as the marina. It's really important that we do these patrols because we are the only organization in the South Sound with a patrol vessel. So we're the eyes and ears of the water here in Commencement Bay. I'm really excited to take you guys out with us and to show you how we protect this community and our environment. So let's go. So we're starting our patrol today here along Schuster Parkway and the railroad tracks here that bring grain here to the Temco grain terminal. And the reason why we patrol this area is because we want to make sure that there's not a lot of dust coming off of the grain ships when they're doing the transfer. Dust from the wheat or corn or soybeans or whatever, if a lot of it gets into the water, it will kind of act like a fertilizer and help algae grow, but it could grow too much to the point where we have algae blooms that will block the sunlight from the critters and the vegetation below the water surface that need sunlight. So we like to make sure there's not big dust clouds coming off of the ships while they're doing the transfer. And it's not just agricultural products like grain coming through on these rail lines. There's also oil trains coming through. So crude oil is shipped in from the Dakotas and from Canada on these same rail lines. And then also passenger trains like Amtrak use these rail lines. We're also patrolling the rail lines to make sure there's no spills happening on the trains themselves. And then if you look out, you can see that there's two big grain ships waiting their turn for when this guy is ready to leave. My house is up there. I mean, I can see the water from my living room, so at some angle you should be able to see my living room, right? Okay, so these big gray ships that are right outside of the Chinese Reconciliation Park are actually two ships owned by the U.S. government, and they are here as emergency response. So they kind of sit ready for anything from hurricane relief to support during any wartime efforts. And they sit here because they're pretty strategically located. We're close to the Joint Base Lewis McChord. We are close, obviously, to the Port of Tacoma, Port of Seattle, and Port of Olympia. So these guys sit here kind of ready to go when they might be needed during an emergency event. So now we're along Ruston Way, and one of the things a lot of people notice along this waterway, it's not a waterway, okay. So now we're here at Ruston Way, and one of the things a lot of people notice while we're in this area is all these wooden pilings sticking out of the water. And what these are, these made up the infrastructure of the old Dickman Mill, which was a lumber mill, which hasn't been operating for about 40 years. And the issue with these pilings is that they're covered in creosote. And creosote acts like a preservative. It helps preserve the wood while it's sitting in the water. But it's also really toxic, carcinogenic, means it causes cancer. And so nothing can really grow on it except for the things that do grow on it, like herring eggs, sometimes starfish, anemones, stuff like that. They can't survive. So it's really toxic to critters. So once the plan is in place to get these pilings removed, the way that CHB will participate is we will review all of the plans. We will look at the protocols that are going to be used to remove the pilings and make sure that the city and the Army Corps of Engineers and Metro Parks are using the most environmentally sound protocols and strategies they can to ensure that any contamination that might be in the sediment here isn't going to get reintroduced into the environment when they remove the pilings, and we'll do that through comment letters and through discussions with agency staff. So one of the issues when you're doing piling removal like this is that the sediments that the pilings are in could be contaminated. So before we do any removal of the pilings, the sediments will have to be tested, and if they are contaminated from the legacy contamination here in Commencement Bay, the agencies responsible for doing the removal will have to be really cautious, really careful, and follow really strict protocols for how they remove the pilings so they don't disturb the sediment and release the contamination back into the bay. Can I eat my lunch now? Peace. Boat lunch. Okay, so we're coming up to Point Ruston right now. Historically, this was the site of one of Tacoma's dirtiest industries, the Asarco Smelter. And Asarco was a company that did copper smelting here in Tacoma, and what that means is you take your precious metal, in this case copper, and you heat it up, and it's got other sediments and rocks surrounding it, and you heat it up enough to separate the copper from its surroundings, and then you have a waste product that is called slag. This waste material is heavy in arsenic and lead and other really nasty chemicals that cause cancer. When the smelter was operating, there was all this pollution coming out of the stack. So, and in that pollution, in that, the dust, whatever was coming out of the stack, there was arsenic and lead, and so it came up in a big cloud, and it actually settled back down over 1,000 square miles. We're still stuck with a lot of that contamination today, where some people still have really high levels of arsenic and lead in their soils, and so they have to be really careful about not letting their kids play in their yard, not doing gardens, taking off their shoes before they even come inside. The way that this site was cleaned up was they physically removed the soil, the contaminated soil, physically removed it, and then put clean cap or a clean fill layer on top of it. And these rocks along the shoreline here help contain that clean cap. So we always want to make sure when we're going by that we don't see like any of the rocks falling into the water, and we don't see any bare spots or anything like that. Okay, so from Browns Point, we will head towards the port along Marina View Drive and along the residential area here on the hills. And what we're looking for when we are patrolling this area, because it's residential, we're looking for hazards like landslides or slips that might pose a risk to the people that live here. We're also looking for any activity on the beach that might pose a threat to the intertidal community, so unpermitted development, structures, anything that's not supposed to be there. We are headed towards Tai Marina, which is just on the other side of this slope. And one of our favorite things to see as we're heading in this direction are all of the seals and sea lions that like to hang out. So let's see if they're here today. So one of the things that we look for when we are patrolling along Marina View Drive is debris. We tend to find a lot of debris in front of this marina. It's a lot of styrofoam, a lot of pieces of wood, pieces of insulation. Unfortunately, a lot of it ends up being too small for us to pick up with our net, so we have to leave a lot of it behind. but we do patrol and try to pick up as much as we can. And then from the marina here, we keep moving closer and closer towards the port, and we're coming up on the mouth of the Hylobos waterway. I think I just ran over a log. I'm not gonna put that in the video. So that's a wrap for today's Bay Patrol. Thanks for coming along with us. Today we did one of our many routes. We started along Schuster Parkway and the grain terminals. We went all the way along Ruston Way and saw some creosote pilings to Point Ruston, where the Asarco site is. We came around to Browns Point and Marine View Drive, and now we're back here in front of CHB offices, and we're getting ready to put the boat away. So doing Bay Patrol is a really important part of CHB's programming. We are actually the only organization in the South Sound with a patrol vessel. So we're the eyes and ears of the water here in Commencement Bay, and we're often the first to respond to any incidences here on the water. It's really important that we have clean waters here in Tacoma and Commencement Bay, so our community can enjoy the waters, so our wildlife are protected, and our ecosystem as a whole is healthy. Thanks again for coming along with us, and we'll see you next time. Are you filming right now? So one of the things, okay. I'm a cormorant. All the way up to the Asarco site, we passed by some creosote pilings that are gonna get removed sometime soon. Too much information, so we are often the eyes and ears, no.